sections on 2.2, limits involving infinity. So this is going to be a little different from what we just did on 2.1. On 2.1, we did the limits from the left-hand side and also the right-hand side. So similar to that, we will do reading from the right-hand and left-hand sides of the limits. But in this case, we're also involving is infinity. So let's look at an example. So example number 1, we have this equation. The graph of that equation is going to look something like this, two hyperbolas, right, next to each other. And we're going to be asked to find the limit as x approaches to positive infinity. So in this case, the x-axis is right here. If it's going to positive infinity, we're taking this line that's going to go on forever in this direction. And then the y number is still what we're looking for, just like in 2.1. The y number of this graph right here, as this one goes to positive infinity out this direction, is getting really, really, really close to is 0, right? So that's going to be 0 for the y number. The limit as x approaches to negative infinity, so that would be going towards this direction right here. The y number for this graph right here is approaching really, really, really close to is also 0 in this case, okay? So when you have something like this, we're going to be asked to find the asymptote. Obviously, in this asymptote right here is something that we have across this direction because both ends is approaching really, really close to is the 0 line right there. So we have is a horizontal asymptote. And in this case, the horizontal asymptote is at y equals 0. Okay? And then we have example number 2. So example number 2, doing the same thing. We're taking this graph right here, and these graphs, we're going to look for the limit. So the limit as x approaches to positive infinity. So as we go towards positive infinity on the x-axis this direction, this graph right here is approaching really, really close to, again, the y number for this that we're looking for is positive 1. Then we have the limit as x approaches to negative infinity, so that's this direction going towards this way, right? The y number of this right here is approaching close to negative infinity in this case, okay? And so then obviously when we have the asymptotes for this, we have actually two asymptotes, because this one right here will settle really, really close to positive 1, and this will settle really, really close to negative 1. So in this case, we have horizontal asymptote at y equals positive 1 and negative 1. Now pay attention to this also. I want to point this out. This is going to be at x approaching to positive infinity or negative infinity, one of those guys right there. You're going to have a number for the y numbers right here. Okay? So again, x is approaching to some kind of infinity. The y is going to become a number right there. Alright? Because if you look at example number 3, we have a tangent graph, which we're very familiar with from last year in pre-calculus. And so this time we're asked to find the limit as x approaches to pi over 2 at the left-hand side. So this goes back to yesterday's. So pi over 2 is going to be approximately around here. And then the left-hand side of that would have to be referring to is this graph right here. So the y number, right, the y number of this right here, for tangent, it's going to go all the way up to positive infinity. So positive infinity is the y for that one. Okay? The limit as x approaches to pi over 2 from the right-hand side. So again, that pi over 2 is in this direction right here. The right-hand side of that would have to be referring to this graph right here. So the right-hand side of that y number is going to shoot all the way down to negative infinity. So what we have in this case is different. We're going to have a vertical asymptote, and because we're looking at the left-hand side and the right-hand side of pi over 2, that's going to be a vertical asymptote. Okay? Now, I also want to point out from example number 2, remember I said when x is approaching to positive or negative infinity, the y number is going to be some kind of number. But in this case, we have is the x approaching to some kind of number, right? And the y is going to approach to infinity. So it's actually going to flip from that, all right? So last example, example number 4. When we have a graph like this, I call it tree trunk example because it looks like a tree trunk right there, and it shoots up. This actually never touches in the 1 over x squared, the tree trunk example, okay? So no matter what, you can try to focus your calculator, but it should never touch. They both shoot up all the way up to infinity. So when we look at the example on this one, it's asking us to find the limit as x approaches to 0 from the left-hand side. That would have to be referring to this graph right here. It's shooting all the way up to positive infinity. The limit as x approaches to approaching to 0 from the right-hand side, that would be referring to this one. Again, this one's going to shoot all the way up to positive infinity. So in this case, we're going to have obviously a vertical asymptote, and the vertical asymptote is at x equals 0. 0. Okay? So again, I want to point it out right here. When x is approaching to a number right here, we have infinity as the y's right there. Okay? So that's the assignment that we're working on. So again, just going back to it, if x is approaching to infinity, the y has to have a number. And then going the opposite direction, if x is approaching to a left side and right side of a number, then you have positive infinity. All right, so let's go ahead and try the examples on these.